In the year 2147, Earth wasn't the same planet it had been a century before. Decades of climate disasters, wars over water and food, and near collapse had finally forced humanity to grow up. Nations stopped fighting each other and formed something called the Global Concord, a real working union of every country left standing. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest. And for the first time in history, Earth spoke with one voice. That voice chose Dr. Elias Varick to carry its message beyond the stars. Varick wasn't a soldier or a politician. He was a scientist, a linguist, and someone who'd spent his life trying to understand others. Whether it was negotiating peace between warring cities after the Great Drought, or decoding the signals from deep space. He believed communication could solve anything, even with beings who might not look, think, or feel like humans at all. His ship, the Odyssey, was small, just big enough for a crew of 6 and a few tons of supplies. It carried no weapons, only data drives filled with Earth's art, music, history, and scientific knowledge. Paintings from long-lost museums, recordings of birdsong from forests that no longer existed, equations that had powered clean fusion reactors, and even children's drawings from schools across the globe. It was humanity's best self, packed into a vessel no larger than a city bus. The journey took 3 years, even with the new slipstream drives that bent space just enough to make interstellar travel possible. When the Odyssey finally arrived at Vespera Station, a massive ring-shaped hub floating in neutral space near the edge of known alien territory, Varick felt a mix of awe and fear. The station glowed with strange lights, its architecture unlike anything built by human hands. Smooth curves, shifting colors, and corridors that seemed to breathe. He was met by representatives of the Triad Hegemony, the 3 dominant alien species that ruled most of the Orion Arm. They were tall, silent, and moved with eerie grace. Their faces were hard to read, some had multiple eyes, others none at all. But their body language spoke volumes. They weren't hostile, but they weren't welcoming either. To them, humans were newcomers, unproven, possibly dangerous. Over the next few weeks, Varick worked tirelessly. He gave presentations, answered endless questions, and listened more than he spoke. He explained how Earth had nearly destroyed itself, how it had clawed its way back through cooperation, not conquest. He showed them footage of people rebuilding cities after floods, sharing food during famines, and planting trees in deserts. He didn't hide humanity's flaws, he laid them bare. We made terrible mistakes, he told the council. But we learned, and we're still learning. Some of the hegemony delegates seemed moved, others whispered behind closed doors. Rumors spread that certain factions within the hegemony saw humans as too emotional, too unpredictable. They weep at music, one official reportedly said. How can such beings be trusted with galactic stability? Still, Varick pressed on. He believed if he could just get them to see Earth not as a threat, but as a partner, everything would change. He dreamed of human scientists working alongside alien researchers, of shared knowledge that could heal broken worlds, of a future where no child had to grow up in fear. Then, everything changed in an instant. A hegemony patrol ship, small, fast, and armed, was destroyed near the edge of human-colonized space. The explosion was massive, captured by dozens of sensors. Within hours, edited footage began circulating. It showed a human-made drone, sleek and black, launching a stealth missile before vanishing into the void. The evidence looked solid. Too solid. Varick was summoned to the High Tribunal the next morning. No warning, no chance to prepare. The chamber was cold, silent, and lit by pale blue light that made everyone look ghostly. The judges, 3 towering figures from each hegemony species, sat high above him, their expressions unreadable. You are accused, one intoned in perfect, emotionless English, of orchestrating an unprovoked attack on hegemony assets, of using your diplomatic cover to gather intelligence, of representing a species unfit for galactic society. Varick stood tall. That footage is fake, he said calmly. I've reviewed the telemetry. The drone's signature doesn't match any human design, and Earth has no reason to attack. We came here in peace. But the tribunal wasn't interested in telemetry. They wanted a message, and they'd decided Varick would be it. Behind the scenes, Earth's diplomats were screaming into comms, sending emergency appeals, offering full investigations, even proposing joint forensic teams. But the hegemony had already made up its mind. To them, executing one human envoy would show the galaxy what happened to those who disrespected order. Varric knew what was coming. In his final transmission to Earth, patchy, breaking up with static, he didn't beg. He didn't rage. He simply said, "Tell them we tried. Tell them we reached out with open hands. And if they choose violence, remember who taught us its cost." Then the feed cut out. Back on Earth, billions watched the official broadcast. There was no blood, no drama. Just Varric stepping into a shimmering chamber, a soft hum filling the air, and then nothing. His body remained, but his mind, his memories, his laughter, his dreams was gone. Erased. The hegemony called it neural dissolution, a clean clinical end. To humans, it was murder dressed in science. In cities, villages, orbital habitats, and underground farms, people stood in silence. Some cried, others stared at the sky, fists clenched. Children asked why the nice man from the stars didn't come back. Parents had no answer. But in the halls of the global Concord, silence meant something else. It meant calculation. It meant resolve. Because while the galaxy thought they'd just silenced a diplomat, they'd actually awakened something far older, deeper, and more dangerous. The collective will of a species that had survived extinction once and wouldn't let it happen again. And they had no idea what Earth had been quietly building in the dark all these years. The moment the broadcast ended, Earth didn't erupt in chaos. There were no riots, no panicked mobs, no calls for immediate war. Instead, a heavy, quiet grief settled over the planet like a thick fog. People gathered in homes, community centers, and public squares, not shouting, just sitting together, staring at the same empty sky. The envoy hadn't been a celebrity, but he'd become a symbol. He was the one who carried humanity's best hopes into the unknown, and now he was gone. Not dead in the usual sense, but erased as if he'd never existed. That felt worse. In schools, teachers paused lessons. Kids drew pictures of the Odyssey and wrote messages like, "We miss you," and "Come back." In factories, workers stopped their machines for a full minute of silence. Even in the orbital shipyards where construction never paused, welders turned off their torches and floated in zero gravity, heads bowed. It wasn't just mourning, it was disbelief. How could the galaxy do this? They'd sent someone with open hands and the reply was cold, calculated annihilation. But while the world grieved, deep beneath the surface, both literally and figuratively, something else was happening. In secure bunkers under mountains, in shielded labs orbiting the moon, and in quiet command centers hidden beneath Antarctic ice, leaders and scientists were already moving. Not with rage, but with terrifying focus. The Global Concord Council convened within the hour. No speeches, no debates, just hard questions and harder answers. Was it really us? Someone asked. Every data stream, every sensor log from the border zone was pulled. Within 12 hours, their top cyber forensics team confirmed it. The drone in the footage was a forgery. Its propulsion signature didn't match any human engine. The missile trajectory defied known physics. Someone had stitched together fake data to frame Earth, and they'd done it well enough to fool the hegemony's own systems. That meant one of two things. Either a rogue faction within the hegemony wanted war, or someone else was playing a dangerous game. But it didn't matter now. The damage was done. An innocent human had been executed based on a lie, and the entire galaxy had watched it happen. Still, Earth didn't lash out. Not yet. Because the leaders remembered the old days, the centuries of war, the bombs, the hatred that nearly wiped them out. They knew revenge without strategy was just suicide dressed as justice, so they waited, they watched, and they prepared. Meanwhile, across human space, ordinary people began doing something unexpected. They didn't just mourn, they organized. Neighborhoods formed volunteer networks to support families of off-world workers. Artists painted murals of the Envoy standing between stars and Earth. Engineers in Mumbai, Nairobi, and Buenos Aires started sharing open-source designs for signal boosters and emergency comms, just in case. It wasn't coordinated. It just happened, like a reflex, like the planet itself was tightening its muscles. Back at Vespera Station, the hegemony celebrated. Not openly. Aliens didn't throw parties, but their official channels broadcast statements about restoring order and deterring primitive aggression. They declared Earth a non-compliant species and froze all diplomatic channels. Trade routes were shut down. Human ships were ordered to leave hegemony space within 72 hours or be destroyed. But something strange happened then. Smaller alien civilizations, those who'd lived under the hegemony's rule for generations, started whispering. They'd seen the execution. They'd seen how calmly the human envoy had faced his end. And they'd noticed how quickly the evidence had been accepted without real investigation. Doubt spread like a quiet virus through the galactic underbelly. On Earth, no one knew this yet. All they knew was that their one bridge to the stars had been burned. And bridges don't just disappear, they leave ashes. And sometimes from ashes you build something stronger. The real turning point came 3 days after the execution. A young data analyst in Reykjavik, working a graveyard shift in a near-empty monitoring station, picked up a faint anomaly. It wasn't a message, it was a pattern. Buried deep in old hegemony public broadcasts, hidden in the background noise of routine traffic logs, was a repeating sequence. At first it looked like static, but when she ran it through a decryption algorithm originally designed to recover lost climate data from the 2080s, it resolved into coordinates. And a timestamp. The coordinates pointed to a remote relay station on the far edge of hegemony territory. The timestamp? Exactly 47 minutes before the fake drone footage was released. She reported it immediately. Within hours, a team of linguists, cryptographers, and exo-intelligence officers were on it. They cross-referenced ship movements, energy spikes, and communication blackouts. Piece by piece, a picture emerged. Someone, likely a hardline faction inside the hegemony military, had staged the attack from that relay station. They'd used stolen human tech schematics to build the fake drone, then triggered the explosion and released the doctored video. Their goal? To provoke a response from Earth, justify a full invasion, and crush humanity before it could become a rival. But they'd made one mistake. They assumed humans would react like they used to, with fear, division, and blind anger. They didn't understand that Earth had changed, that survival had taught them patience, that silence didn't mean weakness, it meant they were thinking. And while the hegemony toasted their victory, Earth's quietest project, buried so deep even most Concord leaders didn't know its full scope, was already being prepped for activation. It wasn't a bomb. It wasn't a fleet. It was something far more elegant, far more human, a tool built not to destroy but to expose, to disrupt, to say, you think you control everything? Let's see how you manage when your own system turns against you. No one on Earth spoke of revenge out loud, but in every lab, every command center, every home where someone looked up at the stars and whispered, "We won't forget," the message was clear. The galaxy had just learned the wrong lesson about humanity, and they were about to find out what happens when you push a species that's already survived its own end. After the execution, Earth didn't scream. It didn't send angry messages or launch ships toward alien borders. Instead, it went quiet, so quiet that from the outside it almost looked like surrender. But inside that silence was a storm of focus, discipline, and something far more dangerous than rage: clarity. The leaders of the global conquered knew one thing for certain: if they reacted with violence, they'd confirm everything the hegemony claimed about humans, that they were emotional, reckless, and unfit for the stars. So they chose a different path, not weakness, not fear, strategy deep, in a facility carved into the bedrock beneath the Himalayas, one so secret it didn't appear on any map. A team of scientists and engineers had been working for over 20 years on something they called Project Janus. It wasn't a weapon in the traditional sense. There were no missiles, no explosives, no death rays. Instead, it was built on an idea so simple it was brilliant. If you can't fight the giant, cut the strings that let it move. The hegemony's power didn't come just from ships or weapons. It came from instant communication. Their entire empire, spanning dozens of star systems, ran on a network of quantum-entangled relay nodes. These nodes allowed messages, orders, and data to travel faster than light, linking fleets, governments, and economies in real time. Without that network, the hegemony would be like a body with a severed spine, still alive, but unable to move as one. And Earth had figured out how to break it. Years earlier, after recovering debris from a derelict alien probe that had drifted into the outer solar system, human scientists had spent decades reverse engineering its core. They never understood all of it, but they learned enough. They discovered how the quantum links worked, how the signals stayed synchronized across light years, and, most importantly, how fragile that synchronization really was. Project Janus was designed to send out a single, ultra-precise pulse, a kind of dissonance wave, that would temporarily collapse the quantum state of every relay node in the hegemony network. Not destroy them, just silence them. For a few critical hours, maybe days, the hegemony would be blind to itself. Fleets couldn't coordinate. Planets couldn't call for help. Orders wouldn't reach their destinations. The illusion of unity would shatter. The beauty of it left no trace. No radiation. No wreckage. No dead bodies. Just silence. And in that silence, the truth would speak louder than any bomb. But activating Janus wasn't just a technical decision. It was a moral one. The Concord Council debated for 36 tense hours. Some argued it was still an act of war. Others said it was the only peaceful option left. In the end, they agreed. This wasn't about revenge. It was about balance, about showing the galaxy that Earth wouldn't be bullied, but also wouldn't become the monster others feared. While the decision was being made, something powerful was happening on the ground. People weren't waiting for orders. Across cities, towns, and space habitats, communities began preparing, not for battle, but for resilience. Farmers doubled food production in vertical gardens. Engineers reinforced power grids. Teachers updated emergency curricula to include interstellar civics and crisis response. It wasn't panic. It was purpose. Everyone understood without being told that Earth was entering a new chapter, one where they'd have to stand alone, at least for a while. And yet there was no despair. If anything, there was a strange sense of calm, because for the first time in generations, humanity wasn't divided, no nations blaming each other, no corporations hoarding resources, just people, millions, billions, working together because they had to, and because they finally believed they could. Back in the Himalayan bunker, the Janus team ran final simulations. The pulse had been tested in isolated labs, but never at full scale. One wrong frequency and it could backfire, maybe even disrupt Earth's own comms. But the lead scientist, a quiet woman who'd lost her entire family in the Jakarta floods decades ago, simply said, "We've checked it 1,000 times. It's ready." She didn't say it with pride. She said it like someone handing over a key they'd been entrusted with. Above ground, the Concord issued a public statement, short, calm, and firm. "We mourn our envoy. We reject the false charges against us, and we will protect our people by any peaceful means necessary. No threats, no bluster, just truth." Then, at exactly 03:17, Earth Standard Time, 17 minutes after the moment the envoy's consciousness had been erased, the order was given. Deep underground, a single button was pressed, not with drama, not with fanfare, just a soft click in a room full of people holding their breath, and across the galaxy something began to unravel. But Earth didn't cheer, didn't celebrate, because they knew the real test wasn't what came next. It was what they'd become while waiting for it. They weren't striking back out of anger. They were defending their right to exist, to speak, to be heard. And in doing so, they were proving something even more important, that humanity had finally grown up. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full of meaning, full of warning, full of hope. Because sometimes the loudest message isn't shouted. It's delivered in perfect, devastating quiet. 17 minutes. That's all it took. 17 minutes after the envoy's mind was wiped from existence, Earth sent its reply, not with fire, not with fury, but with silence. And that silence spread faster than any explosion ever could, across the Orion Arm, in star systems where alien cities shimmered under twin suns and fleets patrolled the void like ancient guardians. Something strange happened. Screens went blank. Command channels crackled into static. Navigation systems froze. At first, officers thought it was a glitch, a solar flare maybe, or a software bug. But then it happened again, and again, until every ship, every station, every planetary hub tied to the hegemony's quantum network fell into sudden, total silence. No warnings. No alarms, just nothing. On the bridge of the hegemony's flagship, commanders stared at dead consoles, shouting orders into comms that carried no sound. On distant colony worlds, governors tried to contact their capitals, only to find the lines cut, as if someone had snipped the threads holding their civilization together. Trade convoys drifted, lost. Emergency broadcasts failed. Even the automated defense grids powered down, confused by the absence of central commands. For the first time in over 300 years, the hegemony wasn't one. It was many, scattered, disconnected, and suddenly very alone. Back on Earth, no one celebrated. There were no victory parades, no triumphant speeches. People gathered in homes and public squares, watching live feeds from deep space monitors, holding their breath. They weren't watching destruction. They were watching consequence. And it was more powerful than any weapon. The Global Concord released a single message broadcast on every open channel the hegemony still used, now reduced to slow, light-speed radio waves. It wasn't long. Just one sentence, spoken in calm, clear English with translations in every major alien dialect Earth had managed to learn. You silenced one voice. Now hear the silence of your own empire. That was it. No demands. No threats. No, we told you so. Just truth wrapped in quiet. And that message hit harder than a warhead, because the hegemony hadn't just lost communication, they'd lost control. Without instant coordination, their three ruling species began turning on each other. The tall, insect-like Cathar accused the gelatinous Vor of sabotaging the network. The armored Zentari demanded emergency powers, claiming internal betrayal. Panic spread faster than facts. Rumors bloomed in the dark. Earth has a superweapon. Earth hacked our minds. Earth is coming for us, but Earth wasn't coming. Earth had gone dark. All human ships, civilian and military, switched to passive mode. No active sensors, no transmissions. They drifted like ghosts along the edges of known space. Invisible not because they were hiding, but because they chose not to be seen. Earth's colonies shut down non-essential signals. Cities dimmed their orbital beacons. Even the great solar mirrors that powered the equatorial arcologies tilted slightly, reducing their energy signature. It wasn't retreat. It was strategy. Let the galaxy wonder. Let them fear the unknown. Because fear of the unseen is far stronger than fear of the seen. Meanwhile, on Earth itself, life went on. But differently. People didn't stockpile weapons. They stocked knowledge. Libraries saw record visits. Online courses in physics, linguistics, and diplomacy filled up overnight. Kids built model relay stations out of scrap metal and old tablets, trying to understand how Janus worked. Artists painted murals of tangled wires turning into olive branches. There was a sense not of war but of awakening. Humanity had just proven it could stand toe-to-toe with a galactic power, without firing a single shot. And that changed everything. In the outer systems, smaller civilizations, those long forced to obey the hegemony, saw what happened and began to move. A mining colony on Proxima B declared independence. A research outpost near Sirius stopped sending tribute. A coalition of free traders formed a new alliance calling themselves the Silent Accord, inspired by Earth's message. They weren't attacking. They were simply stepping out of the shadow. The hegemony tried to respond, of course. But without their network, their responses were slow, clumsy, and often contradictory. One fleet received orders to blockade human space, only to find those orders had been canceled hours earlier, but the cancellation never arrived. Another group launched a probe toward Earth, but halfway there, it lost guidance and spun uselessly into deep space. It was like watching a giant try to swat a fly with its hands tied behind its back. On Earth, scientists monitored it all with quiet intensity. They didn't gloat. They studied. They learned. Every signal failure, every confused transmission, every delay in hegemony response was logged, analyzed, and added to humanity's growing understanding of galactic politics. This wasn't just defense, it was education. Earth was learning how empires fall, not from outside force, but from within. And through it all, the people held steady. There were no riots, no panic buying, no conspiracy theories taking over the airwaves. Instead, neighbors checked on each other. Communities shared power during scheduled blackouts. Schools taught children not just math and science, but ethics, what it meant to have power and how to use it wisely, because everyone understood. Earth hadn't won a war. It had made a statement. And statements only matter if you live by them. Weeks passed. The hegemony's silence grew heavier. Their unity frayed. And Earth? Earth waited, not with clenched fists, but with open eyes. They knew the galaxy was watching, not just the hegemony, but every species that had ever been told humans were too wild, too emotional, too young to join the stars. Now those same species were asking a new question. What if they were wrong? And in that question, Earth found its real victory, not in breaking an empire but in earning respect, not through force, through restraint, not through noise, through silence, and in that silence a new kind of strength was born, one that didn't need to shout to be heard. 2 years passed, not in silence but in careful motion. Earth didn't vanish from the galaxy, it simply stopped begging for a seat at the table. Instead, it built its own. Life on the planet had changed in quiet, lasting ways. Cities ran on clean fusion power drawn from the moon's helium-3 mines. Vertical farms fed billions without tearing up another acre of soil. Children grew up learning not just Earth's history, but the basics of interstellar diplomacy. How to listen, how to question, how to stand firm without striking first. The memory of the Envoy wasn't buried in monuments. It lived in classrooms and policy debates, in the way people paused before speaking in anger. Would that honor what he stood for? Became a common question, whispered in homes and council halls alike. Out in space, human ships moved differently now, not aggressively but with purpose. They helped rebuild a damaged water recycling station on a struggling colony near Alpha Centauri. Not because it was human, but because it needed help. They shared atmospheric scrubber designs with a methane-breathing species that had lost its homeworld to a solar flare. They didn't ask for anything in return. They just showed up, fixed what they could, and left. Word spread, not through broadcasts, but through word of mouth across star systems. Earth doesn't talk much, but when they act, they mean it. The hegemony, meanwhile, had fractured. What was once a united front had splintered into competing factions. The Cathar withdrew to their home cluster, blaming the Vor for the network collapse. The Zentari tried to rebuild the relay system alone, but without cooperation, their efforts failed. Trade slowed. Trust evaporated. And in that vacuum, new voices rose, smaller species, former subjects, independent thinkers who began talking to each other, not through orders but through choice. And then, one day, a ship arrived at Luna Station. It wasn't hegemony. Not exactly. It flew no old banners. Instead, its hull bore a new symbol. 3 interlocking rings, each a different color representing the 3 original species, but now equal, not hierarchical. The crew called themselves the Allied Continuum, a coalition of reformers, scientists, and diplomats who had spent the last 2 years trying to piece their civilization back together. And they came with a request, not to negotiate terms but to apologize. They didn't land with fanfare. Just a single shuttle, docking gently at the lunar outpost. When the hatch opened, the lead delegate stepped out, not in armor, not in ceremonial robes, but in simple, woven fabric, the kind Earth's own farmers wore. They carried no weapons, only a data crystal. Inside the crystal was a full retraction of the charges against the envoy, a public exoneration, a formal disbanding of the high tribunal that had ordered the execution, and a proposal. A new council, open to all species, built on transparency, not control. Earth didn't say yes right away. The Global Conquered met for 3 days. Not in anger, not in triumph, but in deep reflection. They remembered the cost. They remembered the silence that followed the envoy's erasure. And they knew that saying yes too easily would dishonor his memory just as much as saying no out of pride. So they set conditions. Not demands, conditions. The first, the envoy's name would be cleared in every official record across the galaxy. The second, the quantum network would be rebuilt as a shared system, open to oversight by neutral parties, including Earth. The third, no species, no matter how small, would be excluded from future talks. The Allied Continuum accepted all 3 without hesitation. When the first joint session of the new Galactic Assembly opened, it wasn't held on a grand alien station or in a human capital. It took place on a neutral asteroid, redesigned by engineers from 7 different species. The chairs were all the same height. The translation systems were open source. And the first item on the agenda? A moment of silence, for all those lost to misunderstanding, fear, and the arrogance of power. Earth didn't dominate the talks. It listened, spoke when needed, offered solutions when asked, and slowly something new began to grow. Not an empire, not an alliance of convenience, but a community of equals. Back home, people didn't cheer. They didn't declare victory. They simply went back to their work, planting crops, teaching children, repairing ships, knowing that the real test wasn't in winning a confrontation, but in building something that lasted, because Earth had learned the hardest lesson of all. True strength isn't about how hard you can hit. It's about how wisely you choose not to. And in the end, the galaxy didn't bow to Earth. It respected it, not because humanity had the biggest guns or the fastest ships, but because it had shown something rare: the courage to walk away from revenge, and the patience to build peace instead. Years later, when new envoys from dozens of worlds came to Earth, not to inspect, but to learn, they were taken not to military bases or government towers, but to schools, farms, and community centers. There, they saw something that confused them at first. Humans working side by side, not because they were ordered to, but because they chose to. Laughing, arguing, helping, failing, trying again. That, more than any technology or strategy, was what changed the galaxy, because the stars had seen empires rise and fall. But they'd never seen a species that, after being struck down, chose to stand back up, not with fists, but with open hands, and that, more than anything, was Earth's real revenge, proving that kindness, when backed by resolve, is the most powerful force in the universe.